Thank you for joining us today for another edition of Conversations with AARP in the Virgin Islands. I'm Troy Deshabert Schuster, State Director for AARP in this territory. Today, we have an important and timely topic to discuss, one that impacts the lives of many Virgin Islanders, and that is probate and probate reform. As the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, dedicated to empowering Americans aged 50 and older to choose how they live as they age, AARP has been a staunch advocate for Virgin Islanders to retain their rights to their hard-earned assets, ensuring the financial future of generations to come. Over the past 5 years, AARP in the Virgin Islands has been at the forefront of this fight, collaborating with lawmakers to advance legislation that addresses probate issues. But the fight is far from over. At a time when our courts are grappling with a backlog of probate cases ranging from 700 to 800 at a time, with an average resolution time of 1 year and instances stretching to 25 years, creating a plan to address this system is crucial. These numbers have been further exacerbated by the global pandemic and the increased number of deaths of persons without a legal directive, adding as much as 300% to the caseload of probate, all while families are left to struggle with the financial and emotional turmoil of the process. The countless stories of families battling this complex system while grieving is heartbreaking. Today, we have invited Senator Marvin A. Blyden, Vice President of the Legislature of the Virgin Islands and Chairman of the Committee on Housing, Transportation, Infrastructure, and Telecommunications in the 35th Legislature of the Virgin Islands, to provide insight and share his plan to legislate for the creation of a probate court. A 5-term veteran, Senator Blyden has dedicated his political career to improving the lives of our residents, championing housing reform and streamlining processes in government operations. He joins AARP's bipartisan effort to discuss probate reform, an issue that transcends political parties, as this is a matter that affects all Virgin Islanders. It's about securing our assets, honoring our loved ones' wishes, and providing for a brighter financial future for generations of Virgin Islanders to come. And so we welcome Senator Marvin A. Blyden. Welcome, Senator.
Good morning, State Director Shabut, and I'm happy for being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today for this important conversation about probate court. We hear of the issues of probate all around us in the Virgin Islands. Most recently, the topic of derelict or seemingly abandoned properties has come up, and at the forefront of that is the fact that many of these properties are stuck in probate for many, many, many years. And so we would like to discuss that. And first of all, let's start off by talking about the legislation that you have proposed to develop a probate court within our judiciary.
Well, first of all, we know that probate reform is an issue of tremendous importance to all Virgin Islanders for a number of reasons, and I'm going to give you just a few, okay? First, it helps Virgin Island families to settle their affairs when a loved one passes. At present, we have situations where family homes are held up in probate for decades, as you stated, leading to tax problems, deterioration of the property, and family conflicts, just to name a few. It makes more housing available for Virgin Islands residents by keeping properties from becoming idle, abandoned, or in poor condition, which is exactly what happens when properties get held up in probate situations. It also helps to prevent neighborhood decay. Abandoned properties are nesting ground, as you know, for rodents and disease-bearing insects, for criminal activities, and for overall neighborhood blight. They also bring down the property value of rental properties to include the homes around them. It helps to keep properties in the hands of Virgin Islanders, which is very important to me. And one of the things that almost always happens to properties that are tied up in probate issues is that they end up in tax problems. And we know that there are many people who comb through our properties, tax data to identify properties in tax trouble. We know if you go to the Lieutenant Governor's office of any given day, you will see many individuals there combing through the records to see what properties have issues moving forward so they can purchase them. And that's another issue I have an issue with. And also settling those probate matters quickly is very important in terms of keeping the homes out of tax problems and in the hands of Virgin Island families. And finally, probate reform is important for the overall community. Healthy, well-maintained residential and commercial properties are economically productive properties, and they are also attractive properties that draw residents and visitors alike to value our community. So those are some of the examples why it's so important to have those probate law in place.
Yeah, thank you. And over the years, as we mentioned earlier in the show, AARP has been very instrumental in bringing forth legislation that will reform the probate code of the Virgin Islands. These pieces of legislation have all come out of the Uniform Law Commission of the United States. And many people have not heard of the Uniform Law Commission, but for our listening and viewing audience, the Uniform Law Commission is a group of attorneys across the United States. They're uniform law commissioners from each state and territory. Here in the Virgin Islands, it's Attorney Yvonne Tarps, who is the former chief legal counsel of our legislature, as well as Attorney Tom Bolt. Those are our two uniform law commissioners. And so these uniform law commissioners from all over the country, they come together and they look for ways to standardize and make laws uniform across the states so that as people move from state to state, it becomes easier for them to maneuver the legal system, makes it easier for courts to function, makes it easier for attorneys to do their work, et cetera. And so the Uniform Law Commission of the United States has come up with many, many acts that reform probate code. And AARP has brought a lot of those into the Virgin Islands in cooperation with our two uniform law commissioners, being the advocates that we are at AARP. And thank you, Senator Blyden, because every single one of them you voted in the affirmative on, whether you've been in the Committee of Primary Jurisdiction or in the Committee of the Whole, you've always supported all of those measures to reform the probate code here in the Virgin Islands. So AARP thanks you. And on behalf of the people of the Virgin Islands, we thank you also because it's so very important. And so a lot of people think that by having a will, that you're going to keep your property out of probate. And that is not so.
Correct.
A will does not keep your property out of probate. All a will does is it gives the judge an indication of your wishes as to how your property should be disposed after it goes through probate.
All right.
The only two ways to keep your property out of probate, or three. Number one, if you just give your property away to your heirs before your death. A lot of people don't want to do that. They want to maintain control of their property. The second way is having a trust. A trust is a separate legal entity, a corporation established to hold the property. And then upon your death, the trust can be liquidated easily and the property is given to your heirs of choice. And the third way is by executing some of the instruments that are now law here in the Virgin Islands because of the work of AARP and senators such as Senator Marvin Blyden and our uniform law commissioners. And so I want to highlight just a couple of them before we get further into the conversation regarding the establishment of a probate court. But the first one is the real property transfer on death deed. And it's really easy to do. You can either go to an attorney or visit your recorder of deeds office and execute a real property transfer and death deed so that as soon as you die, the property automatically transfers to the person named in that deed. And the property will not end up in probate. It's a lot less expensive than developing a trust, a lot easier than developing a trust. and it gives the owner of the property full control of their property up until the time of their death. So they can change and assign a new heir if they choose. They can remove all heirs. They can sell the property. They can mortgage it. They can rent it. They can renovate it. They can do whatever they want. It gives the owner full control. Another exciting piece of legislation that has been enacted here in the Virgin Islands is the Vehicle Transfer on Death Act.
Yeah.
And that's even easier to do. You can visit the website of our Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and the simple form is there. You fill that out and you turn it into the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Then upon your death, your vehicle is transferred. And when we say vehicles, that applies to automobiles of all sorts, as well as watercraft, as well as aircraft. So any type of vehicle. And again, a lot of people don't think of their vehicles ending up in probate, but it does happen. It does happen. So these are just two of the more popular acts that have passed through and are now law in the Virgin Islands. And we encourage everybody to take advantage of this to make sure that your properties don't end up in probate. And of course, the other ones regarding financial instruments like bank accounts and stocks, bonds, other securities. There are other pieces related to what happens when multiple heirs inherit a piece of property, because that's a big issue, right, Senator? I mean, we see here so many times we end up with like 20 or 25 or 30 heirs.
It is.
And, yeah, and that becomes hard. How do you divide up a single house between 20 people? Do you give each person one room or or a piece of a room? You know, it doesn't really work. So we have lots of information on all of these acts in our website. You can visit AARP.org/VI, and there's loads of information there that you can learn from, and then you can go and take advantage of these new laws in the Virgin Islands. But Senator Blyden, tell us more about establishing the probate court and what inspired you to do that.
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question, because when you just made a statement, I smile because I have a large family. It's 13 of us, 13 children. Both of my parents died, and they did not do any estate planning. So, as you know, we are going through the same issues right about now. So I'm very happy to bring this legislation forward, because I'm personally going through it at this time still, after several years of dealing with this situation. So the legislation is actually very simple, though. It creates a probate division within the Superior Court, and it provides for the appointment of an additional judge in each district, whose primary responsibility will be to handle probate matters. And it also provides an appropriation so that a court can provide for the staff and other resources that a probate division would need. And additionally, the presiding judge can assign additional matters to the probate division if necessary to assist with the flow of cases in general. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what the bill basically does.
And how is the judiciary system receiving it, the Superior Court? What's the feedback you're getting from this as you discuss it?
Well, as a matter of fact, the presiding judge, Rishaj, mentioned it during the budget hearing in finance, during the budget process, and he is the one basically offered that type of legislation that will assist in bringing on the caseload. So he actually mentioned it in his testimony. So I'm sure he's on board, and we will be discussing further with them in terms of how we actually bring it forward when it comes to the funding and staffing, etc., and other resources.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that, and especially at AARP with all the work that has been done on probate reform, the icing and the sprinkles on the cake, right? To bring it all together and to make things move a lot faster for those who have not done their planning and who have not made sure that the properties don't fall into probate. And one of the saddest things with probate is that so many families end up having to sell their property to pay the legal expenses of moving the properties through probate. And so it's a loss for the family, for the heirs, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so hopefully with this probate court that will be established shortly, assuming that it all goes through the legislature well and the governor signs it into law, then it can reduce the cost of moving properties through probate court. And do you have any indication as to how many cases there are? We did mention at the beginning anywhere from 700 to 800. Is that still the case at this time?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it's only getting larger, and that's why it's so critical that legislation come forward to actually address this most pressing issue here in the territory, because as you stated, many families, to include mine, are held up for years, with no resolve. And many of those families, they die, and the properties end up in other people's possession. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, and we have such limited land here, right? And there's so many people coming from other parts of the United States, other parts of the world, wanting to buy our land. Of course, we welcome everybody. The Virgin Islands is and has always been a melting pot, and everybody is welcomed, no matter where you're from. But it's so important for our local people to hold on to their property. Real estate is real wealth, right? Real estate is better than, in my estimation, better than having cash in the bank, because it could be converted to cash.
I agree.
And generally, the value of real estate exceeds the rate of inflation. The increase of value of property usually exceeds the rate of inflation. So it's an excellent investment. It's building equity and securing the financial future of families and their offspring, their heirs. And it's so sad to see so much of it being lost.
As our elders usually say here in the Virgin Islands, land does not rot. It only increases in value. So it is critical and it's important, that we really value it. And like you say, it's very, very, very important. It's scarce like gold, It's a very good investment for any family in the territory, especially in these beautiful Virgin Islands. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
My grandmother, Miss Annie, as everybody affectionately and respectfully referred to her, Anseta Deshabert, she always said that land doesn't rot.
No, it
And
doesn't.
an interesting story, I don't often tell the story in public, but when Governor Paiwanski was in office and Leon Hess wanted to buy some land in the Virgin Islands to open a refinery, at that point, my grandmother owned estates Hope, Jerusalem, and Blessing on the south side of St. Croix.
Okay.
And Governor Paiwanski brought Leon Hess to my grandmother and encouraged my grandmother to sell those estates to him to build a refinery.
Wow.
And my grandmother was in the kitchen with one of her housekeepers, the cook, cooking a big pot of kalaloo. And she told Leon Hess, no, land doesn't rot, and I'm not selling my land.
Exactly.
And yeah, and so we have a picture of Leon Hess sitting outside on her steps, like the thinker, with his hand down in his head, thinking of how he was going to convince my grandmother to sell him that land so he could build a
Yeah.
refinery.
Okay.
And Governor Paiwanski stayed inside, begging my grandmother to sell. And she kept saying, no, land doesn't rot, land doesn't rot. But then finally she saw that it would be good for the economy of St. Croix and the Virgin Islands. So she finally sold the land to Leon Hess. And now the refinery sits on the land that was once her own. But my grandmother never sold land to use the money. She sold on nonsense. She sold land to buy more land and better properties.
Wow.
And then Sunny Isle Shopping Center arose, and the rest is history. But yeah, so land does not rot, and we should always do our best to hold on to it, to care for it, and to secure our financial future. And again, it's so sad when families have to sell it for probate or to pay a bill, and then it's gone forever, and they don't ever get more land again.
And that is true, and that's happening too much and too often. I've seen many of my friends and their families sold land, especially on the island of St. John, to pay off bills and do other stuff with it. And I'm like, try not to sell your land, lease your land. Find a way to lease it or rent it out. Don't sell land. and it's hard to maintain and get land in these days and time in the Virgin Islands. It's scarce, more
Yes.
scarce than gold, like I said. So we must find ways and put laws on the book to help to protect our people when it comes to land and probate issues.
And you bring up a good point about leasing land. A lot of people don't think about leasing land, but leasing
Yeah.
land is a great deal, you know. It's a very, very good deal because
It's a win-win.
it's a win-win, right?
Yeah,
It's the land continues to be yours. You collect
exactly.
rent for the land.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that person renting from you gets tired of that building, the building becomes
It's
yours.
yours. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
They can't pick
Yeah,
up the building and go with it.
exactly. Exactly. I can tell you a story or two, but yeah, it makes sense to do that. Yep.
Right. Yep. Yep. Land lease. Land lease. Very, very important. In retrospect, I wish my grandmother had leased all of that land to Leonez, right?
Exactly. 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 'Cause the whole thing right now would belong to you guys.
Right? We would own it, right?
Yes, you would. You would.
Literally.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yep, that's for sure. That's for sure. So,
Mhm.
and now there's been some discussion. I know there's no legislation yet, but I know you've heard a lot about this topic that Governor Bryan brought up about derelict properties and taking control and fixing them and perhaps selling them back to the original owner or disposing of it some other way. What are your general thoughts on that? Again, I know there's no legislation, but there's been lots of conversation, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of it.
Honestly, I've heard some of it. I would like to know more and know the detail because the details is what really counts. The intent is what really counts when it comes to legislation. But I would, well, generically speaking, if I want to assist my people in terms of helping them to hold on to their property, I think I would find a way in terms of giving them grant funding and create a vehicle where we are sure that we have the right contractors, the right appraisers, and everyone else involved in that space to assure that they can have a complete building when they're done, and they don't have to pay to basically go through so much in order to keep their property. We must create a vehicle to help them to get there, whereas they feel more enticed to do that and work with the administration and whoever is involved in that process. So I would like to see the legislation because there are many ways you can get things done, but it's how you go about doing it and how do you get the involvement of the individuals who the properties belong to. So we can be creative at the same time, think outside the box and see if we can really find a way to help our people and get the same end result. So I would not like to speak too much on his legislation because I have not seen the details and that's what I look for, but that's how I would do it based on my experience and my expertise. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, it is an interesting proposal. I have not seen anything in writing myself, so I'm not in a position to comment on it. But all I can say is that I hope that it'll be done in such a way that we can actually help the original owners of the property to keep their property. I hope it doesn't become a way or a mechanism for people to lose their property because that would be very tragic and totally counterproductive.
Not about my dead body. I don't. I'm gonna find a way to get myself involved and see how I can assist and help for us to move forward. Because that's what it's all about, our people and assuring that they get to keep their properties moving forward. Because it's incumbent upon us to do that for many of them who really do not have the resources or the finances to do that. And that's why there are so many derelict buildings around this place. So unless we have opportunity to utilize funds to do that, hey, I look forward to assisting in any way, shape, or form possible to assist our people.
Excellent, excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. I know that you're always for the people, and we appreciate that very much. And but the one thing as I was listening to some of the talk about this proposal that came to my mind is what about government-owned properties? I think that the government needs to set the example and start there first, right?
I agree.
There's so many derelict government properties, and they need to be fixed.
I agree. And many of those derelict properties can be used for revenues and in terms of, like I said, rentals for the government in terms of our coffers and bringing in revenues to help run the government and create services, and programs. And you're correct. I know in the 31st legislature, I had legislation not only to do that, but to actually create a government complex at that time. And I remember sending it to the post auditor and getting an analysis, and he was like, "No, there's too much issues in terms of at the time, in terms of many private individuals who already provide services for the government and what's going to happen in that space." And he gave me a whole list of stuff. So honestly, being a new senator, I left it alone. But looking back, I wish I'd pursued it, and by now something might have happened. But it's never too late to do the right thing. So me and my team have been looking at that to see what can be done, because as you know, everything is rented out for government offices, and it's difficult right about now because it's so in depth. With so much individuals, it's a challenge. That's all I'm going to say. It's a challenge moving forward.
Yeah, and the amount of money that the government must spend each year on renting properties for government offices must be astronomical. Astronomical.
It is, and that should be going toward services. Those revenues, they should be going back in the coffers to help make things better for the constituents. So it's a challenge.
Exactly, and the government needs to get away from disposable buildings. That's what I call it. They construct a building, they use it for a few years, I don't know how many years, 5, 6, maybe 10 years. They say it has mold, and then they just stop using it and they build a new one. Fix the buildings. Fix the buildings, use them.
Correct. Preventative maintenance and routine maintenance will go a long way in that respect.
Imperative. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we've come to the end of our program, and thank you so much, Senator Blyden, for joining us today. And we look forward to learning more about this legislation regarding the establishment of a probate court. We invite people and to access AARP's website, aarp.org/VI, for more information, and also our AARP Virgin Islands Facebook page. There's lots of information there as well regarding this, and AARP stands in full support of establishing the probate court within the Superior Court of the Virgin Islands, or the probate division. Probably that's the more precise term. And again, we thank you and for all that you've done, and we thank all the other senators who supported probate reform over the years as AARP has brought legislation forward. And we look forward to creating a better and brighter Virgin Islands in the future.
And I cannot say enough in terms of AARP and the role you have played in actually assisting with this legislation moving it forward. I want to thank you guys for all that you do and continue to do on behalf of the people of Virgin Islands. Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. We look forward to a future conversation with you, Senator.
Definitely. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
You too. Good day.
All right.